distanced himself from a scheme to decriminalise cannabis use in parts of the capital.
I've said a number of times, and I say again, I'm not in favour of us changing the law or decriminalisation. I'm very clear that we're not in favour of changing the drugs laws.
Well, it was revealed a proposed pilot programme would see young adults caught with the Class B drug offered speeding-style classes or counselling instead of arrests. The trial, if approved by City Hall, would run in 3 London boroughs and apply to those aged 18 to 24. You can see legal eyes all over this, thinking there's inconsistencies. However, a spokesman for Sadiq Khan said similar schemes were already being used in other parts of the UK, adding that it would divert young people who are found with a small amount of cannabis away from the criminal justice system and instead provide help and support to cut reoffending. So should we decriminalise cannabis? Let's speak to Peter Reynolds, president of CLEAR, the Cannabis Law Reform Group, and Mick Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Afternoon to you both. Peter Reynolds, I think I know the answer, but who's right, Sadiq or Keir?
Well, I don't think Keir knows what he really wants to say, because if you go back to the beginning of last year, he did a programme on Channel 4 where he said exactly the opposite. He said, he said something to the effect of, I wouldn't decriminalise straight away, but in the short term, I'd stop prosecuting it, people found with cannabis. Which, I mean, as you've just explained, and as the Sadiq Khan spokesperson said, this is happening anyway. It's going on all over the country in any case. And, you know, it's not decriminalisation. Let's be clear about that. It's not decriminalisation. The law has not changed. It's a matter of police policy. And Sadiq Khan, as the Police and Crime Commissioner for London, because he has a dual role as mayor, in conjunction with the Met Commissioner, has authority over police policy, and he can say, as an operational matter, we're not going to pursue this. We're not going to waste police time on it.
But there is still some police time being used, obviously, in order to, you know, if a kid's got 1/8 of whatever in his pocket and they nab him, they've still got to facilitate the new system, which would be putting them on a course or counselling, whatever it might be. So it's not without admin, is my point, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, that's because they bothered to do it, of course. I mean, I think a lot of police officers take the attitude that, you know, that they'd rather turn a blind eye to it in any case. And I mean, they've also got the option of street caution, you know. So, I mean, they've got so many options now about cannabis. I mean, it really just shows the indecisiveness and the ineptitude of all our politicians, that they don't know what to do. They keep on coming up with these sort of half-cocked ideas.
Yep.
And why don't they just get on with it and deal with that policy in a sensible way?
Well, let's put some of that then to Mick Neville, retired Scotland Yard detective. Afternoon to you, Mick. You've seen this from all manner of angles. I'm sure you've nicked people who've got stuff on them. You'd have certainly been in high-level meetings when policies were discussed in terms of how the police should deal with what appears to be, in many cases, an increase in drug use. Has Sadiq Khan got something right here?
No, I don't think so. And I, up to a point, agree with Peter. It's a complete bodge. There's 2 ways to deal with drugs. You either crack down on them ruthlessly, like they do in countries like Malaysia, or you decriminalise it. What they're doing here is another halfway house where it's a mess. And as an operational detective, the way you get drug dealers is you arrest the user and say, look, where'd you get this from? And then they might get a caution or whatever. By doing this sort of system, you're cutting off the police methods of getting information on the dealers. And so it's this, we continually go along with this fudge. And the politicians continually reinvent the wheel. We had this in Brixton under Brian Paddock, and it didn't really work then either. And what really concerns me is, you know, I've been involved in youth work for many, many years, especially in inner London, is that these youngsters who are stopped, they're not going to be, or young adults, they're not going to give a proper name and address. They're not going to attend classes. You know, these people don't operate in a sort of diary world, and they're going to be lost to the system. And we saw under lockdown how kids just simply disappeared from school. If you get them into the police station, if they are under arrest, then at least you can find out if somebody actually cares for them, if there's something that needs to be done. This is just a bodge, and it's a similar down the track of like pretending it's criminal but not doing anything about it.
So it's not going to work, Peter Reynolds.
No, it won't work. I mean, it won't achieve anything, really. I mean, what we need to do is get a grip on this subject and do the sensible thing. The only way to deal with the harms of cannabis is legal regulation. And let's remember that most of the harms of cannabis don't come from the cannabis itself. They come from the criminal market in which it's traded. Because the people, although the people at the bottom end of the tree, as it were, who the average consumer is buying from, may not be a bad person, a couple of levels up, then very, very nasty people, very bad people.
Yes, this is big organised crime, of course, even though it's sort of written off as it was just a bit of puff, bit of weed, whatever it happens to be. You know, I smoke it because I'm a methodical amateur philosopher. I sit in the garden shed and, you know, reinvent the wheel, etc. But as you say, this is big business. So it's that bit that's got to, and I think, Mick, would I be right in saying you concur with that? Because you alluded to the fact that it's the bigger fish that need to be caught, not, you know, the average kid on the street with a spliff.
Absolutely, but you don't get to the bigger fish unless you start with the minnows. This is often the issue, and it's just a reality of policing. You know, I ran police informants, I ran the drug squad at Brixton. I know how the game goes. And drug use, the illegal trade in drugs drives up crime wherever it is, and it drives up robberies, burglaries, muggings, assault, shootings. There's millions and millions of illegal pounds to be made out of this. And the legislation calls drugs control drugs. And the question is, controlled by whom? Because they're certainly not controlled by the police or the government. They're controlled by criminals. And somehow we've got to sort that out.
So do we legalise it, Mick? Is that the straight answer? I know we're short on time. Is that the short answer, as Peter is saying?
You either legalise it or smash it, crack down. Yeah. You've got two choices. They're doing neither.
Peter?
Well, I would agree with that, but I mean, it's proven that you can't do it. When you've got demand, you can't stamp it out by cracking down on it. All you do is
So we legalise it. We just legalise it.
We legally regulate it. That's the important thing. We bring in rules and regulations. We take responsibility for it. Instead of abandoning responsibility, we take the responsibility and deal with the problems.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Peter Reynolds, president of CLEAR, the Cannabis Law Reform Organisation. Mick Neville, retired detective chief inspector. You heard both views there. It's becoming a really difficult argument, isn't it, to have the moral contingent, where people would once argue this on a kind of almost a moral template. I think that's largely gone. Damage and what it's likely to do. Would you have more cannabis users if it was legal? Maybe you can share your experience of what that feels like to have a cannabis user in your family where it wasn't quite such a kneel from the young ones, recreational, no harm done activity. 0344 499 1000. We'll go over to the phones with you shortly. You're listening to Talk Radio and the news headlines coming next.